Hello, everyone. This is Lou Pamonti, and this is Music from the Inside. And I'm very honored today to have a special guest here on the podcast. We have Alan Wallis, the CEO of Dynamite Songs. Alan has led a long career. We're speaking to him today from London, England. And Alan has led for years, he led Ernst & Young's media and entertainment valuation team. And then a few years ago, he launched Mojo Music and Media. And that was so successful that he decided to, in 2024, to start Dynamite Songs. Now, full disclosure, Dynamite Songs has recently acquired my catalog. And that's why I met Alan. And we started talking. It was very interesting because I got a request from Alan's lawyer saying Alan would like to talk and get to know me. I had always thought that if my catalog was ever acquired, it would be acquired by a faceless corporate entity that would just be gobbling up my stuff. Well, it turned out to be quite the opposite. And me and Alan a few weeks ago jumped on a Zoom and we must have talked for an hour. He's had a very interesting career. So, Alan, welcome.
Hey, Lou. Nice to be here.
We're talking to you from London, England, which looks like from your beautiful home. Do you have a studio there in your home or a listening room?
Yeah, it used to be it was more of a studio, and now it's a sort of a home office with less of the studio in it now. Right? This is home base. Well, in fact, it was my whole career at Mojo was here. But with Dynamite, we've recently taken some office space because we've got a team in London. There's three of us in London, so I took some office space in Soho and right in the heart of Creative City, really. So
right.
It's great.
Well, on our talk a few weeks ago when we were just chatting, we touched on a bunch of issues, and that's why I wanted to have you on the podcast. You're roughly my age, and I'm thinking that the time that you grew up would have been 70s London. You know, you might have been a little too young for 60s swing in London, but you were certainly there for 70s rock and roll London.
Definitely, that's definitely right. I mean, yeah. So let's think. 1970, I was 15,
yeah,
and and by then I'd taken up playing guitar. Found the cool kids at school who also play guitars and love music, and they're still my friends today, all these years later, right? Yeah, and going to gigs in London, seeing bands. And I mean, where I live, my favourite story is at the top of the road. It's gone now. There used to be a guitar shop called J60s. And in that shop, a certain young guy called Steve Marriott used to work.
Of course.
And another guy came in with his mate to buy a bass guitar. And that was Ronnie Lane.
Ah.
And the mate who went in there with him was Kenny Jones. So you got three quarters of the Small Faces.
Right, of course.
And I'm desperately trying, not successfully yet. I think the blue plaque or whatever the plaque is you get for rock and roll stars nowadays, for the Small Faces, shouldn't be over Don Arden's office in Carnaby Street. It should be above J60's in Manor Park.
Because it must have been.
That's where they met.
Oh wow, isn't that crazy? Well, in London in the 70s, it must have been hard not to trip over a future rock star.
Yeah, I mean, I was on holiday with my wife on the Gulf Coast of Florida, and we were having dinner in a restaurant. And it was a big car park, and it started like it does in Florida sometimes. It started pouring down with rain. So I got talking to the guy next to me, and he was English, but he'd lived in America for years. And he said, "Hey, oh, you're English. Where do you come from?" I told him, and he says, "Do you know, I'd moved from Leicestershire to there because I wanted to get into the music business, and I I was taken in by, you will never have heard of him, Jimmy Winston's dad. I said, what, Jimmy Winston, who was in the Small Faces, the original keyboard player. His dad ran the local pub, the Ruskin Arms. He said, yeah, found out it was the original keyboard player from Yes.
That's not funny.
Just, but he was there.
Florida Mall.
Yeah. And then the Ruskin Arms then became the home of Iron Maiden. I was at school with the original drummer from Iron Maiden, Clive Burr, who unfortunately passed with MS. That was very sad. But yeah, lots of gigs locally.
The
Yeah,
Ruskin Arms was a pub, right?
Ruskin Arms. It was a pub that for many years was a famous rock and roll pub, particularly for heavy metal in the 80s. I mean, round the corner, the uppercut where Jimi Hendrix wrote Purple Haze, so there's plenty in East London. But yeah, there was lots going on. Yeah.
So let me get a picture of this. You're a teenager in the early 70s. You have probably dreams of becoming a musician yourself.
Yeah, I think that was always going to be a
secondary, a sideline.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it was always going to be for fun rather than to make money. But we did that.
So in your early career, you went on, I'm guessing, some kind of a business course or a law course.
I left school with A levels, and that was it. My education was, well, I did a diploma in English civil law when I was with the HMRC, the Revenue, because I was there for 12 years learning. That's where I learned to become a valuer. Right. And then I moved into professional practice. So no, I've got no formal qualifications. Everyone sort of asks me, expects me, oh, you must be a qualified accountant or a qualified lawyer. Right. No, nothing. No. Left school at 18.
So you kind of got into this sideways. You weren't maybe headed directly for it. You kind of slid into this. Now, for those people out there who don't understand what valuing is or valuation, this is setting a value on music catalogs, right?
Yeah. I mean, when I started, I was valuing all sorts of things. It wasn't just music. I sort of started to specialize in music. When private equity started coming into music, there was a greater demand for valuation services in the music business. And I sort of spotted that at the beginning. We had a strong client base in that sector. So that's why I sort of gravitated towards that. And then sort of it became quite a big thing. Did a lot of valuation work. The 3 Ds, Lou, right? Debt, divorce, death. They're three of the reasons you value a lot of assets, but certainly a lot of my business at Ernst & Young was built around the 3 Ds.
So it's very interesting because as a valuation person, someone who would evaluate catalogs, it's almost like A&R, except it's on the opposite end of the artist's career. Like a Clive Davis would look at a young artist and say, I see something in that, and I see possibilities in this. And I'm guessing that you look at a catalog and you go, okay, I see possibilities with this, and I see possibilities with this. I mean, these super famous catalogs are kind of a no-brainer. I mean, if you're talking about the big ones like Dylan and Queen and all of those real big ones, but we're talking about a mid-level catalog. So what are you looking for in a mid-level catalog?
The old adage is the past is no, guide to, or no certainty.
No
for
indication
the
of the future.
Yeah, but for a music catalog, for something that's 20, 30 years old, the income is usually very stable. So you're looking for stability, and then you're looking at, well, what could change that? What is coming up that might influence the value of a track? Is there anything you see on the sync side or everything? But in the main, it's very steady. So it's almost predictable. It's not, but you know what I mean? It is over time. You look at a 5-year cycle, it will go sort of, you might get some modest growth, but what you'll see is you'll see a spike, something will happen, a tour, a re-release, something will happen. There'll be a a spike, and then it might go down a bit. But over time, if you put that line and draw a straight line through it, you probably see some modest growth. So it's very predictable. When you're valuing a catalog, I think it's a bit different. I've seen the difference between me as a valuer and me now as someone who buys catalog. And I think, the difference is amazing, is that when I was valuing a catalog, I was using that past as a guide to the future, but now I'm looking at it. Yes, I'm getting comfortable that, okay, the past is all reliable, but what do I see in this catalog that means that it will grow going forward? And what can we do about it actively? There's a big difference.
Right. So because as someone who buys catalogs, obviously what happens in the future is going to be extremely important. So that brings us to a couple of topics. It brings us to
Okay.
topics like streaming and AI. You
Yeah,
and me touched on AI briefly in our last talk, and
yeah.
I'd love to get your take on how these two aspects, streaming and AI, are going to affect even the valuation of your catalogs in the future.
I mean, I'll come at this as with my publishing hat on. As far as looking at it as a publisher, AI, everyone sees the threat. I think I don't accept this argument that the AI companies are putting forward of fair use. They've not been authorized. They've ingested the copyrighted works to build their models. And it's very simple. They should pay for that because it's doing harm to human artists, human writers, and their creativity. And it also is the expense of other people pay to use a song, so why shouldn't they? That's where I come from that point of view. But I'm not an AI skeptic, and neither am I a sort of I don't know what you call it, an evangelist for the tech industry. I just come at it thinking, well, why do people make music? Right? Well, what is it? Why do they do it? I don't think human composers, writers, lyricists, they're not going to go out of business. That's going to stay at the center of the machine from where I'm concerned. But the AI companies, I can see some areas where I can see more of a risk. I'll tell you, one of them is, and I'll throw this back at you, having done it. What about TV, writing TV scores? I can see AI eating into that there because of cost.
And I think we're talking about underscore music here.
Yes, underscore
Yeah.
music. Yeah,
Yes. 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 And you know what? A lot of it is the same anyway. Me being a former writer of TV and film, I know that the people I work for, they wanted it to sound like the music of the day. So whenever I tried to reinvent the wheel on a TV show or a movie, I was immediately shot down. So I can see the TV and film people just loving AI.
what we call production libraries as well, which is a bit of the same thing. And I know people, there was a few years ago, people were sort of trying to aggregate production libraries and get scale. It's not a sector I ever was interested in, or really understood, because I like proper songwriters writing proper songs, right? Yeah, I see AI as a big risk there. I was talking to a songwriter a few weeks ago, and he was using AI to help him demo songs to work things out, not
Yeah.
for the finished thing, but just to
Right.
to get him started. And I think a lot of it came down, and I'm not into using some of these tools, but the prompts he was using, he was refining the prompts to just try and
Right.
but just to produce demos that he could then humanize.
That's very interesting. And not only that, you can get it to give you 20 different versions of something with
Yes.
20 different prompts. But,
Yeah.
in a culture like Nashville, where there's a whole subset of musicians and singers that just work on demos, they very rarely will work on
True.
finished products. That
True.
might just go away.
Yeah. That's interesting as well. No, no, I think about why I don't get worried about, it's not going to do away with great songwriters or songwriters and I think it's the audiences. And I think audiences have changes, but you look at generations today that everything's about experiences, isn't it now? You know, you want to have these experiences. So that's why live music and live venues are doing so well because people want
Right.
that live experience because they don't get it
Right.
elsewhere. And I think it's the same with they want real music. I think they'll see through AI because at the end of the day, how do I see it? I see it like, why did they write the song? AI doesn't have a reason to write the song. It's not like, you wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning with an idea in your head, you've broken up with your girlfriend, you're feeling a bit, and you write the song, right? You've got a reason to write the song. AI doesn't have that. Well, another reason you write a song may not be a breakup. It could be, you're feeling really happy. You've met the love of your life and you're feeling
Because
bored.
I'm happy. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it can replicate a song, but it can't create a song. That's how I see it.
Well, I was speaking to a well-known music supervisor out of Austin, Texas,
Yeah.
about a couple of months ago because he was considering one of my songs for a TV show. And very flippantly at the end of the phone call, I said, "Oh, and it's 100% AI free." Because, of course, the song was written 5 years ago and AI didn't exist. At least Suno didn't exist.
Mm.
And he said, "That's very interesting that you should bring that up." He said, "Because we have been instructed to not submit any music that has any percentage of AI involved in it to any TV and film goes, because as we all know, what a music supervisor does is not only find the song, but he's guaranteeing the production that it is
Yep.
unencumbered.
Yep.
And we don't know what's going to happen with the legislation, with the copyright legislation that is
Yep.
inevitably going to come down over the next 2 to 5 years.
Yep. Yep.
Um, and what do they say when they put out their movie and 5 years later, someone comes out, the government comes knocking and says, "You have an AI song in there and you owe this much money." And of course, TV and film companies aren't interested in that.
Lou, I mean, I thought I read recently there is software out there now that can actually work out how much AI is within it and where it comes from. I think.
I don't know how exact it is, but I've
No.
used it and it certainly could tell.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there's
So
but there's another phenomenon though. When auto-tune was invented, I'd say 20 years ago, um, when it became very popular, when Cher did that "I Believe" song, where they
yeah.
used it at its most extreme setting, what has happened with singers now? It sounded unnatural when we first heard it, but then we've got all these millennials growing up with these records where the vocals are auto-tuned from anywhere from subtle to massive.
Yep.
And so now young singers are starting to sing naturally like they're auto-tuned because they've grown up with that sound.
It's interesting. One of the things that they've said about AI, it's going to make music more formulaic, right? But let's not be fooled. Music's been getting formulaic for years, and there's nothing to do with AI.
Yeah.
And it brings me on to the other point you made, and I think one of the reasons for that is streaming, the streaming era. And it's not just the streaming era, it's the dominance now of playlists. To get on a playlist, you've
Right.
got to
Right.
conform. There's got to be a standardization there. If you go back to the turn of the century, the average length of a song was 4 minutes plus. It's now down to 3 minutes. There are certain keys, certain harmonic structures they conform to, and that'll get them on the playlist. And being on one of those big playlists means big bucks.
That has meant in the real world for producers now is to get rid of the intro and lose the bridge.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
all you
You
want
don't
is
need bridges anymore, right?
verses and choruses. Let's get that.
Yeah.
In my world, when I grew up, when I was really busy in the record industry, which would have been 80s and 90s, I mean, the bridge was always like, "Oh, what are we going to do in the bridge?" because the bridge, especially in the 80s and 90s, usually went somewhere completely different from the song. And it was usually a very uplifting moment. And for a guy like me, you could, use all your cool chords and your production techniques and all that stuff to really lift and then go into those final choruses out. And that's kind of gone.
Yeah. And I remember having a conversation with Pete Walkman about that. We both thought, the bridge is the best part of a song. Or we call it the middle eight here, don't we? It's different in the UK.
Yes,
we call it the middle eight. Even if it's not 8 bars, we still call it the middle eight. And I think we did it because he was recording a young boy band, and they were recording a cover of This Boy. And I just said, "No, isn't that a great middle eight? In This Boy again, because he takes it somewhere else." Is it more formulaic? It's been going on for years. You did a little bit of digging before because I know what we were going to be talking about. And, you can go back to the 1940s and people were complaining that because records were becoming, right, with the recorded music rather than live, was the techniques had got there by the 40s. Yeah. There was concerns that music was like turning like a Henry Ford production line, and it was a mass-produced product. And that was back in the 1940s. So I think the streaming era has got a lot to do with that, not AI, funny enough.
Now, look, you and me have been around long enough that we've started with vinyl, okay? Yeah. Then cassettes and 8-tracks came in, but that didn't abolish vinyl because we were just able to record our vinyl to listen to in our car or on our boom boxes or whatever. But then came the CD, and the CD was the cash cow for the record industry because everybody got to buy, wanted to buy their whole vinyl collection on CDs. And then after CDs, of course, came Napster and streaming. But we know, because we've seen it, that none of these are here to stay, including streaming, I believe. I mean, what comes after streaming?
Direct into your head. I don't know.
Right, exactly.
Was it the year before last? Suddenly cassettes started taking a bit of we're becoming popular again. That was never going to last. But yeah.
No, I don't think so.
I mean, it's the way people... but again, the means of distribution, that comes down to how people want to hear things. That's what drives it. The one problem I had with CDs is that everyone thought they had to record for 70-odd minutes, right? So you got a lot of filler on it. There was enough filler on most albums anyway. So to increase it, and then the best albums are 35 minutes long, right? And I've noticed that now. Albums, even... are getting shorter, whether people do albums. I think streaming has just accelerated that standardization of it.
I just know that nothing stays the same ever, and that change is the only constant. And so I really do wonder what's next. Ever since the turn of the century, what we've seen is the devaluation of music. When people used to make a record, they would tour in order to sell albums.
Yep.
Now they make albums in order to sell concert tickets. Yep. And it's completely flip-flopped.
When I was growing up, right, in the UK, we had 2 TV channels. Maybe I can put a third by the late 60s, right?
BBC 1 and 2, yeah.
BBC 1 and 2 and ITV. 3 TV channels, and they didn't show that much pop music, right? I mean, you saw bits of it. There was Ready, Steady, Go. There was Top of the Pops, of course.
Yeah.
The Old Grey Whistle Test was probably at the end of it. And radio, during the early to mid 60s, there wasn't a lot of pop radio. There was a certain number of hours a day, right? So unless you went out and bought a record, you didn't know when you were going to hear it again. When I say that to kids, I say that to young kids who work with me now, and I tell them, once upon a time, if you didn't go out and buy it, you didn't know when you were going to hear it again after it had come out of the charts.
I can remember when a new favorite song of mine came out on the radio when I was, 9, 10. Yeah. Our family had bought a cassette player, a Longines Symphonette cassette player. And I would sit there with a cassette in it with my finger on the record button, waiting for Chum, which was our local radio station, to play the song, and then then I could listen to it whenever I wanted.
And you hated it if the DJ spoke too much over the bloody song, right?
Which they always
Exactly.
do. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So there was fewer activities, so there was more focused on music. There was I just think now fragmentation, there's so many other things you can do with your
Yeah,
time, and I think
yeah.
that's what's causing it is there's so much you can go and do, so much vying for that short amount of attention that everyone seems to have these days, that I think that's part of the reason why.
I mean, the funny thing that I talk about with a lot of my friends, my musician friends, I was born in 1958, so I started doing my first gigs around 1975, and Toronto was always a huge live music town.
Yep.
And because we grew up in that era, we thought that the era that we grew up in, the 70s and 80s and the 90s, were the norm, or the 60s, 70s, and the 80s.
Yeah.
We thought they were the norm for the music business. Well, guess what? We just got lucky. And we grew up in the golden era, and it turns out it wasn't the norm. It was just a blip.
You know, you go back to the very early 60s, let's say pre-Beatles. We talk now that we've gone back to the single, you know, everything's really single. Streaming is all about individual songs, single songs.
Right.
So we're back in the singles thing. But that's where you were pre-Beatles, really. And even sort of up to the mid-60s,
Right.
you were probably still everyone, it was singles, radio play. It wasn't until the second half of the 60s you got into albums and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I think it's interesting. And then the other thing about why I think the 60s and 70s were interesting, because, of course, as we get older, we always think the music of our generation was better than what came behind it. That's very nature. But you think about it, is music hasn't got simpler. I think you'll know better than me that I think some of the songs that are out now, they may be shorter, but they're quite complex.
Some.
And where the 60s, I think it was fairly simple, but it was distinctive. And I think that's the difference. The music of the 60s and 70s, it was simple and distinctive. You know, look, how many 12-bar blues are there? There's tons, but you know when you hear Muddy Waters, or you know straight away if you hear John Lee Hooker. It's not complexity; it's being distinctive. I think that's important, and I think that's what's getting lost. That's where I sit. I just think it was more distinctive, and that's what we're missing.
So one of the main themes of my podcast is encapsulated in my phrase, which is my dysfunction is my superpower. And I honestly believe that. I'm OCD, I'm ADHD, I'm probably borderline autistic. I have a preoccupation with numbers. I do patterns with my fingers. I have my whole life. I drive my wife crazy. I'm even left-handed, just to throw something else. I stutter a little bit. And I've always thought that without all of those things, I don't think that I would be a musician, or at least the musician that I am, because when I was 12 years old, when my fingers hit that keyboard for the first time, it was probably the first restful moment I had in my life up until that time. And I'm curious, in your career and even in your life, and I'm not accusing you of having dysfunctions, but there's no such thing as normal. We're all individuals, and we all have things that help us, things that hurt us. What do you feel that possibly your dysfunctions are that have helped or hindered you?
Well, I'll own up to one, and it's one that it sort of came to the fore again when I started Dynamite, but when I think about it, it's been there for a lot longer, and that's imposter syndrome. I've got a real feeling that I'm going to get found out one day, right?
I don't think you're alone on that one.
No. Yeah. I did the work. I did the work on it because I went and actually got some coaching on it when I decided to start Dynamite. I actually thought, no, am I kidding myself that I can do this, right? And I went and got some coaching, and I did some homework on it, and 70% of people suffer with this imposter syndrome. So it's, it at some point, at some stage, but it's something that sort of sat there with me for many, many years that, yeah, I'm going to get found out one day. Um, and why I think it's my superpower, what I've all the way through is that it means you're wary, you're acutely aware that that's how you feel. So you compensate, you do things, So what do I do? It keeps me humble, I'd say.
Right. Right.
Um, I always want to learn. I want to improve. I will always do that extra bit of homework because I feel I've got to, you know,
Well,
that's no
here's a
bad
question.
thing.
Yeah, no, it's not a bad thing. Um, how do you feel when you listen to music? You've been a lifelong music fan.
Yeah.
Now, for me, it's listening to music and playing music. I mean, do you think that you feel a relief when you listen to music?
I like listening to music just sometimes to make me feel a bit sad, because there's nothing wrong with doing that.
Right.
I tell you what, we were having this discussion in the office the other week, and I was explaining to the team that look, I'm not a great lover of love songs that are all moon in June and everything's great and isn't it lovely? I'm in love. My favourite ones are the love gone wrong songs.
Oh, I,
And Peebles or doing I'm gonna
you put
burn
a
your
spell on me.
I'm gonna burn your playhouse down.
Right.
Shirley
Right.
Brown.
Right.
There's all those great songs. I love listening to that stuff as well, which is really weird. But there you go. I'm a happily married man. But there you go. I like listening to songs about love gone wrong songs. I listen to music also just to, it relaxes me. I can sit and just listen to. And funny enough, when I was growing up, I mean, I was never really into progressive music and the complicated stuff. I love pop songs, so I love the 3 minute pop song, the Motown, all the pop songs of the '60s and '70s.
Right.
I love that. Even songs you're not supposed to love, I liked, and I didn't really get into sort of progressive rock or any of that. And
Right.
so a lot of it was listening to the feel of the record and the sound of the record as much as anything. But as I got older, I started getting more into thinking about the actual craft of the song, the melody, and the lyrics, which I never used to listen to, right?
Right.
And as I've got older, I've done that more and more.
Yes, I always started with music as well, but when I married my wife 30 years ago, she's a lyrics first person. And
Right?
so I'd play her one of my favorite songs and she'd go, "Oh, is that not a great lyric?" And I would say to her, uh, I never really paid attention. A perfect example of that is I had listened to What a Fool Believes,
Yeah.
the Doobie Brothers, for decades. And I love that song. But of course, I'm listening to, ba, 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 right? I'm listening to all that. And she said, "You've never really listened to the lyrics of that?" So we played it back and she explained it to me line by line. Now, I don't know if you've taken that song apart, but that is a genius lyric about this guy that has completely imagined in his mind the relationship with this woman that doesn't exist. The woman exists, but the relationship doesn't exist. And anyway,
Yeah.
so now I love the song twice as much.
Funny enough, and how used to connect with mates was about the song, it was the recording as much as anything. But as we've got older, the big thing, one of my oldest mates and also one of the writers I signed to Mojo, who's now a mate. We all three of us independently have decided, and it was a lyric, and it was a Jimmy Webb lyric.
Oh, which one? By the time I get to be Wichita
Wichita
Lineman?
Lineman.
Yeah. Yeah.
What it was the line? There's a couplet in there that just blows me
And I
away.
need you more than want you, and
And
I
I
want
want
you
you for
for
all
all
time.
time.
That is just brilliant.
The song, I got goosebumps just thinking
Yeah,
about that song.
yeah. Yeah, and funny enough, when I and one of my oldest mates, we never talk about that stuff. We were having that conversation a few months ago, and it was what's the and what a brilliant lyric, you
It's
know.
just the entire song. It's so evocative, and then
Well,
that
didn't he
guitar
say
line.
it wasn't finished, was it? He said, "No, I've not
Yeah,
finished it. It needs another verse." And they
right.
said, "No, it doesn't need another verse."
Isn't that crazy? Eh? I was lucky enough to play that song with Jimmy Webb on piano and Glenn Campbell singing and playing the guitar on a television
Fantastic.
show here in Toronto in the late '80s. It was really a high point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
fantastic.
So listen, we're almost done, but I wanted to ask you one other thing, which you had touched upon in an email to me, and that is you said this was something that you had been thinking about for a while, and
Yeah,
that is, given the state of the music industry, is
yeah,
it possible for there to be another Beatles?
yeah. Yeah, for some
Is Taylor
reason,
Swift that?
yeah. Well, I mean, Taylor Swift something. I don't think. Look, you can never have another Beatles because it was those four individual guys in that particular span of time. Um, you had the fact that they'd spent 10,000 hours or whatever learning their craft, playing
Amber,
in
yep,
Liverpool and Hamburg. Then they had George Martin to produce them, so they had a classically trained, brilliant
yeah,
producer who listened to their ideas, which not many producers were doing back then, right?
that's right, that's right.
And gave them the time to do it from early doors. And you had the four guys. And in Lennon McCartney, you had yin and yang. You
Yes,
had you had McCartney's melodic optimism, and you had John Lennon's edge and darkness, right? So you can never you're never going to get the thing. But I asked myself, could you have something like the Beatles? I remember it was Pete Townsend when he was talking about the internet, that he because he thinks he invented the internet. Anyway, he claims
uh,
he had the idea in the Lifehouse that he came up with the idea of the internet. Um, and he was sort of saying why he thought the internet, World Wide Web might do, and this is the early days, it could one day we'd wake up and we'd find the new Beatles. I think the I just think that again, fragmentation is going to stop that. Look, the Beatles really had their teeny bopper boy band period at the
yeah,
beginning, and
yep,
Beatlemania and all that. But
yeah.
what gave them the legs and gave them the career that everyone became the cultural phenomenon they did was the albums they made. We were talking about it earlier, the singles. We're
Yeah.
back in a singles industry, so that thing isn't going to happen anymore. And then the other thing we talked about as well, fragmentation.
Niche.
The Beatles were raised, in a time when the mass media had nothing else, and that was it. So yeah, and now you can be big within a genre or within a subculture, but whether you can get that mass appeal, I don't know. But what I
Well, there
do,
certainly is no Ed Sullivan show where people of all ages would sit down and watch, and there would be a plate twirler and a ventriloquist dummy and the Beatles. I
yeah.
mean, that doesn't exist anymore.
I just think it's that much harder. I'd like to think it could happen. I mean, you could argue we need it and it would be different. It won't be the same. Yeah, it will be different. And you don't get bands anymore, do you? I mean, how
No,
many,
there's certainly
you know?
isn't many. No.
So I
Well,
think the
listen,
industry's
Alan.
changed.
Listen, Alan. We've run out of time.
Oh, good.
Um, Listen, I want to thank you for sharing some of your experience with us here, and you'll have to come back in a year, and we can talk about and see what's happened in a year.
Yeah, find out where we were wrong. Yeah, it'd be
Yeah,
great.
right,
All right.
exactly. Great.
Thanks. Lovely seeing
Thanks,
you.
mate.
Take care.
Cheers.
Bye now.